Hello and welcome to The Wire. I am Sumedha Pal. Today we're having a conversation with two extremely important journalists from Kashmir. To give our viewers some context, currently the Kashmir Press Club, which is the biggest journalist body in the whole Kashmir, is under a crackdown. The Jammu and Kashmir government has decided to shut the premises, stating that the Kashmir Press Club has failed to register itself under the Societies Registration Act. What we saw on Saturday was also a coup which was initiated on the press club, where a body of journalists, which is being termed as an illegal body, they tried to take control of the press club, and we saw that police persons had stormed the premises, and currently for the past 2 days the press club remains shut. And we are going to be talking to two people who have been reporting from the front lines. They are present in Kashmir and they have witnessed over the years how press freedom in Kashmir has come under attack. I am being joined by Gowhar, who is an author, he is a journalist, he's been in the valley, he's been reporting from there, and I've been joined by Shahana. But she works with the Press TV, which is an Iranian news channel, and she's also an editor, and she dons on multiple roles as she speaks with us today. I just want to thank both of you for joining us and for speaking with us about such an important issue. Welcome to both of you to The Wire.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. So, the first question, I want to give our viewers some context as to what is happening, and it is important for us to tell you that our audience, that the crackdown which is being witnessed in Kashmir currently is being criticized. There is a lot of criticism that the current developments are getting. The Editors Guild of India has strongly come out in support of the press club and in support of the journalists in Kashmir to say that this was extremely uncharacteristic. It is a big crackdown which is taking place, and this conversation that we're having today is not just about the press club. It is also extended to the kind of dangers in which journalists in Kashmir are functioning, the kind of threats that they witness from being charged with serious charges under the penal code to threats of physical violence and harassment as well. So to begin with, I'm going to question Gowhar. Currently, you just mentioned that you've been coming back from the press club. So if you could tell us what are the developments which have taken place and where are we right now in terms of the functioning of the press club and what has happened?
Thank you for inviting me. Yes, we have had the current number strength in the Kashmir Press Club was about 300. To begin with, this was for the first time that an elected body was formed 2 years ago in June 2019, wherein proper elections were held. There was an election commission. There were independent observers, lawyers, and senior journalists. Actually oversaw the elections that went smoothly, and an elected body was formed, and it was registered as per the law of the land. And then August 5, 2019, changes happened, and there was a notification published by government in newspapers that all societies and all NGOs would need to re-register themselves. And the process by our body was followed, and it took about 4 to 6 months to complete that re-registration process, which on 29th of December 2021 was completed, and the re-registration process was completed. But then in dramatic events overnight, the registration was cancelled. And like you have in Delhi the Godi media, so we also have one part of a renegade style media here which works for the government. It's a government sponsored media men who in renegade style wanted to capture this institution, and they came with the posse of police and armed forces and locked the doors. And then when we inquired that who has locked the door, the estates department denied, the police denied, and all the government departments denied that they had locked the premises. But then there was a statement made by the estates department that they have overtaken the building. And that seemed to be the purpose from the word go, that they wanted to control this space. What was this space all about? Journalism has survived in Kashmir without press club for many, many years.
Yes.
And journalists have been doing fabulous work for the last 3 decades, especially. But this was a common address for journalists, especially for the independent journalists, journalists working for international media, and like your channel, The Wire, the news portal like Wire or Scroll or The Quaint. These were, the young budding journalists coming there, more than 300 journalists, members, registered members, who would come, and there were lounges and there were like workstations. They would file their stories. They would sip a cup of coffee. There was a gym. Somebody would go and do the physical training. And there was a library. There were conference halls. It was a very vibrant voice, vibrant space where journalists would discuss things, discuss their stories. And that address is gone. That space has been shut. This is, we have seen many attempts, multiple attempts to throttle freedom of press in Kashmir. But this is so to speak, a proverbial final nail in the coffin to shut and contain and, contain the Kashmir story and not allow journalists to assemble at one place where they can discuss freely. So this is an attack on assembly. This is an attack on freedom of press. And this is also a brazen attempt to capture institutions illegally, unethically. So this entire narrative about that the press club failed to register themselves. It was not for the press club to register itself on its own. There's a process, and that process was duly followed. And it is actually the estates, it's actually the government which first gave registration and asked us to re-register, which was completed. And then in an overnight dramatic way, they said that now you are no more registered. So this tells us a larger picture of what is happening in media in Kashmir. And I've always said and maintained that whatever happens in Kashmir is a laboratory, and those experiments would then be emulated and replicated in mainland India. And you have seen some Wire has faced a lot of difficulties itself, and other independent media portals in India have faced this wrath from the powers that be. So now the message from here is that whatever is happening in Kashmir will happen to you as well. This is a template that they want to build, and how to contain the story. And now, as you rightly mentioned, that Editors Guild of India, Press Club of India, Press Council, and other, Mumbai Union of Journalists, Delhi Union of Journalists, all have condemned this brazen renegadism and this assault on the institution and capture of institutions. But what it has done, the psychological impact is on the young and aspiring journalists, female journalists who did not have space on their own, who do not have offices to work, and they are suffering. And they were on the roadside when I was there. They were in the park, and they did not have they had their laptops, and and they were saying that where would we work? So this space, this attack on their right to work, right to earn livelihood, apart from the stifling of freedom of press speech, I think there's a larger message that this government does not like independent media, it does not like freedom of press, and it wants stenographers, it wants blind partners who will tell their story, and want all journalists to become extension arm of the state.
Now, just to go to Shahana, these are extremely powerful developments which have taken place. Journalists in Kashmir have been under attack, is what has been stated for a very long time. Now, just to go to you and ask you this question, the Press Club has been a symbolic space. I, as a woman journalist, I went there in 2019 when Article 370 was abrogated, and I was a part of that structure, and I saw how you all beautifully functioned there. And to me, it looked like it was not just another building or another institution or any other press club. So how symbolic has Press Club been, and how do you view this? Like Gowhar said, it is a final nail in the coffin for press freedom.
Well, if you ask me this question, I would say for Kashmir journalism and journalists, such things are not going to make any difference. First thing. And another thing, yes, it was symbolic. There's no second thought about it. Yeah. Because the idea with which it was initiated, it was like creating a common space, because press colony had become totally not reachable for professional journalists. Yeah. It had become as if a kind of a passenger bus stop or something, like where police and paramilitaries we would often see. Of course, the journalist would not like to work in a space which is not comfortable. So the point is that Press Club was a space created for professional journalists, wherein international people working for international media outlets, national and local, and especially the young budding journalists would come and have a sneak peek into what actually the newsrooms and what actually it looks like to be in a journalist's office, and what is happening inside the minds of journalists, because everybody would be discussing the situation. Everybody would be discussing politics or society or the things that concern people of Kashmir, the things that concern the common people. So this place was created just so that all the people, all the fraternity would come and sit together and work. But taking away this institution, that too at a time when you are actually doing bad to all the institutions in Kashmir, it clearly signifies that you do not want journalists to work. You're just trying to throttle them, and you're just trying to impose your rules and regulations. For example, let's say that the authorities had no intention of doing any such activity. This is an example. Of course, it looks like to be orchestrated, whatever happened. But for example, if they do not want to do anything of this sort, for example, now it'll be clear, because now journalist bodies are going to re-register. Now let us see what they are going to do. Will they let it happen overnight, or will they take it as long as they want, like years, 2 years and 3 years, and the entire thing will get clear. So the situation, the things that we see at the moment is like Gowhar said, last nail in the coffin. I won't say it's a last nail in the coffin. It is just a clearer picture of what Kashmir and Kashmir institutions are going through.
Yeah. And journalists in Kashmir, just to shift focus to the larger picture here, which is the attack that you all are constantly facing, be it the threats of physical violence, of harassment, or being charged with draconian cases. Young journalist Sajad Gul, he's currently in jail. He has been charged with the Public Safety Act. Gowhar, just to ask you, the kind of attacks that we've been seeing recently, you have also been charged with the draconian UAPA law, and you also faced, I'm sure all of the journalists in Kashmir do at some level face this danger that they might be physically threatened, they might be harassed, or just the profession of journalism in Kashmir has become something which is like a battleground. So what is the situation in terms of the kind of threats that we are facing and the press freedom in the state currently?
It's a very important question you brought about this issue of Sajad Gul, a young budding journalist, a chap, who is still in the university. He's in the second semester at the Central University, completing his journalistic degree, and see the impact on his, psychological health, his mental health. That what the message is for the future journalists, upcoming, up and coming journalists, aspiring journalists. That this chap who just for reporting an event. There was a protest and he uploaded the video of the protest. The protest was not done by him. It was not his protest, but he was only a messenger. And they shot the messenger and imposed serious sanctions against him and used draconian laws. And once he got bail in one case and subsequent FIRs were filed, and now he has been shifted to Court Balwal in Jammu, a jail in Jammu. So this, and it's not, no journalist wants to have focus on himself or herself, because we are not the story. A journalist is not a story. I'm not the story. We are the storytellers. We act as a conduit between people and various institutions. We tell people stories of the marginalized. We tell stories of the dispossessed. We tell stories of the underdogs. So our job is to reflect the ground reality. Once it comes to about the larger picture, what journalists have gone through, especially female journalists like Shahana and others, who face other challenges apart from the whatever the larger challenges are there for the male colleagues, which are about intimidation, which are about summoning, which are about filing of cases. There are other cases, other things that a female journalist faces, which are societal in nature, which because it's not easy to be a female journalist in a place like Kashmir. And if you ask me how many journalists have been summoned, I have done a lot of research on this. To my mind, I think more than 50 journalists have been summoned to police stations, and against more than a dozen cases have been registered, and 3 or 4 have been arrested. Qazi Shibli was arrested for 9 months, and then he was re-arrested and then released. And then Asif Sultan has completed more than 1,000 days in jail. Now this chap, Sajad Gul, and before him many others, Gowhar Wani, and there were others who spent many nights in jails. And then, if you see how many have received calls from various departments, various security agencies about their that intimidation of getting calls, regular calls from CID, CIK, SBK, and other branches, and getting all the details about your siblings, your parents, your everything which is very private, the intrusion and privacy these calls made to young female journalists. And one of our colleagues, Throttle and Rehber, wrote a very detailed piece, which was published by India Ahead, about her mental ordeal, how she was summoned separately by army, separately by police, and how she was intimidated. And imagine, choosing a career from a rural area of Kashmir and then facing all the social taboos that a journalist working, not a 9 to 5 job, but getting away from her rural area and then working in Srinagar and then getting back to home and then getting calls from the police stations and the army and getting summons from the camps. How threatening it is for her mental health. She said she was getting panic attacks, and what happened. It's a larger story about journalism. The archives are being removed from newspapers. It's like erasure of memory. It's erasure of memory, erasure of your who you are. It's about whatever happens to people. They're telling you just don't report it. They don't have the problem that if someone is killed or somebody's body is not given for burial, they say, but you should not report it. That's what the message is, that they do not have problem in snatching corpses. They have problem if journalists are reporting what happens to the families. They do not have problems that if somebody is summoned, threatened, the problem is with reporting. That's why you are seeing this shooting the messenger. And now what they had done exceedingly well, in a sense, ironically, was that newspaper owners like proprietors and newspaper editors, they can easily pressurize them because their major source of revenue comes from the government newspaper, government advertisements.
Yes.
But what they don't know is that independent journalists who are working for various organizations, they do not need their advertisement. They will not be cowed down. They will not be shut. Of course, there are difficulties, and journalism in Kashmir has never been a cakewalk. It has been, in the early 90s, our seniors tell us that it was like, the two swords were hanging over their head, one from the militant non-state actors and the state actors. And it was very difficult to balance, and then in the mid 90s, there was these renegades, government sponsored gunmen who would kidnap editors and tell them to toe their line. So it's never been easy, but journalism has survived in Kashmir despite all these challenges in 3 decades. But why I said that it's last nail in the coffin, because I said this press club symbolically, it was not just a building. It was an address of journalists. It was a post office. And that post office has been snatched. That space where journalists would assemble, gather, discuss story ideas. And from seniors, the juniors would learn how to write, and they would get their text checked, and they would get some advice, good advice from their senior mentors. And that thing has been snatched away. So it's not just about building, because journalism continued even before the foundation was laid for the press club. But it's about that space. It's about that assembly. It's about that kind of a sense of belonging, where it's very similar to what they did when two political parties wanted to form a government in Kashmir in 2019, before the abrogation of Article 370. And suddenly the then governor Satyapal Malik said that now his fax machine is not working. So they did the similar template was followed here. They created one artificial party, which is a government sponsored kind of a group of journalists. One of them is a suspended member of press club, and second is he's a panchayat guy. He's from the panchayat. He has fought elections, and they're not even journalists, some of them. So they created this artificial divide, that as if there are two warring groups. There is no warring group. The body was elected by a powerful 250 members who voted, and these guys who came, they were defeated. They faced a massive defeat. So they still nursed their grudge because they were, supported, patronized by the powers that be. So this is all done. They were used, but the purpose was to shut this space, and they have done that.
Yeah. Now, to going to Shahana. Shahana, this is just, like the larger point that we're trying to get our viewers to understand is this pattern. So how would you describe this pattern of continuous harassment, with the press club being one of the developments in this larger scheme of things?
See, this is not new. I repeatedly say this is not new.
Yeah.
This has happened. There are many newspaper offices that closed down. There are many offices who have thrown journalists out and showed them doors because they didn't have money to pay them. So it's not new. It's a kind of a process that is going on. And one by one, things are being done. basically what Gowhar said, the silence, it's going to happen in entire mainland India, the same situations, people are going to face the same thing. The problem here that we face is that on one side, the authorities and the government repeatedly say that everything is fine and everything is being taken care of. Even now, even today in the statement, they said they want to have free press and they want to have space for the press. But if they wanted to have space for the press, why didn't they do it in the most ethical and most professional manner by just serving an official letter to the press club committee saying that your registration has expired, you should reapply for your re-registration, and this is your time limit. They didn't do that, which means they had a motive. And the other thing what they did is they actually orchestrated, or we can say staged, the entire thing, where the journalist, one side of the group was shown that as a rival group who tried to barge in into the press club and try to have the entire space. But who was the people who were accompanying them? Why was the paramilitary giving them support? Why was the police force giving them support? That's the question that every journalist is asking. Okay, authorities had nothing to do with it, officials had nothing to do with it, but why did paramilitaries and police force accompany them? That was the question. And why did they lock it? If they wanted to support independent journalism or they wanted to have space for journalists, then why is there a lock? So it gives you a broader picture, and it gives you an understanding that, see, on one side they are showing one picture to the entire population, but the reality is something different. And the reality is in front of the people today. When you see the press club is locked, it looks as if a haunted building stands there without the journalists. So again, I repeat, it is kind of all these institutions that have been set up are being actually taken away. And this institution was actually running just because of journalists, not because of any support from the government. It was just the space. Like Gowhar said, it was just that address. Yes, that address was there, but it was entirely, the entire show was run by journalists themselves, because they wanted to have a space where real journalism, real professionalism would be discussed, shared, and talked about. So when you don't want your institutions to work, I think it's high time for government to set guidelines, like whether they want journalists in Kashmir or they do not want. Because I think media has other roles as well. It can have PR, means public relations. Government can do advertisements that they do not want journalists. They want people from public relations and advertisements, so that those people who are interested would become the mouthpiece of the government instead of speaking independently, freely, or what is the ground reality. I repeat, the situation that journalism in Kashmir is facing is whether you're intimidated or not, whether you have a police case or not, whether you're summoned or not. But when your colleague is summoned, when your friend is summoned, it gives you a definite clue that, hey, you got to be cautious. And sometimes you go deep into the silence. I have so many friends who are psychiatrists, and I've been discussing with them that there is this kind of a self-regulation me and many of my friends are doing while we report and while we do stories. We as if there is not somebody who is censoring us. There's not this government. There is this something that has gone deep inside us, that we are trying to self-censor ourselves. We even don't know what sort of a story is going to create panic for the government. We only know that we are working on the utmost professional lines. But what disturbs the government? It is highly heart-wrenching to see Sajad Gul, a youngster, being arrested on one charge and now another charge. So his entire career is devastated, because after this, what is going to happen? He's never going to get a chance to go out of Kashmir, even not out of India, for any of his professional assignments, because once somebody has a police case or something on his or her name, he or she cannot travel. That are the rules and regulations set, and we know how rules and regulations are set in Kashmir, especially when it comes to journalists. So you can understand, in a way, it is they're systematically devastating these institutions, and with that, devastating the entire idea of journalism, because there are many youngsters who are coming up with a thought and with an idea to have a view of this profession and actually work in this profession, because they want to be heard. They want to speak. But what is happening with the incidents like these of Sajad Gul, Throttle and Rehbar, Gowhar, Geelani, and many other journalists,
Pirzada Ashik, Nasir Ganai.
Yeah.
what we see Like, it is totally a blackout for many parents. They are begging their children. I mean, I have counseled, because I am in touch with many interns. I have counseled their parents on journalism. When their parents come and tell me, we don't want our children to pursue journalism because they are going to land in trouble, we whatever we tell them, they're not listening to us, so you please counsel them. So we are left with no idea, like, whether we should mentor them for becoming a journalist, or we should tell them to stop doing it, because tomorrow, if anything happens to them, we will have no say. We will not, even the organization, for example, if I head the organization, I will not be able to help the person who is behind the bars, or who has been taken away by the police in any XYZ alleged case. So the situation where we have nobody to tell things to, and where we have nobody to go to, even the judiciary in Kashmir seems to be completely helpless, because entire situation and entire thing is under control of the authorities.
Can I just take 1 sec? Yeah, one last point I wanted to make, just to one was the clarification that once the government notified in newspapers, through newspapers, that all the societies need to re-register themselves.
Yeah.
And the Kashmir Press Club, the body, followed all the rules and regulations, and they filed the papers, and it was pending in the DC office, and it took like 6 months for the DC to give clearance, and the clearance was given. And second, on the day this dramatic event happened, it was the administration had announced weekend lockdown in Kashmir.
Yeah.
So they came on a lockdown day and barged into it, with police presence, and locked the door. So these two important points that I wanted to make clear.
Absolutely. So we've been seeing systematic targeting. We've been seeing cases of Masrat Zehra, who's currently studying abroad, but her parents, her family is being harassed here. Gowhar and Shahana both have given us names, and there can be names after names of such people who are constantly being targeted for merely doing their job. And consistent targeting, intimidation, targeting of institutions, and harassment. This sums up the lives of journalists in Kashmir who are putting everything on the line to report the truth and to report the stories from the ground while being targeted and while being completely silenced. With these circumstances, this is the kind of conversation that we've had, and here at The Wire, we want to continuously talk about press freedom in India, press freedom in Kashmir, and to bring to you stories of not just the communities that we report about, but also the journalists and their journeys and their stories. So I just want to thank Gowhar, thank you so much, and Shahana, for taking out the time and to speaking with us and pointing out all these ground realities for us. Thank you.
Get a sneak peek of exclusive content before everyone else, for channel members only. Memberships start at ₹89. Hit the join button below.